Hi and good morning. I'm Muhammad Farhan bin Nazaruddin. Today I'll be presenting about the new classical school of economic thought, emerging in the mid 20th century and strongly associated with the University of Chicago. The new classical school played a major role in the reshaping modern economics. This school revives classical ideas but strengthens them using rigorous mathematical modeling and the concept of rational expectation, which is the idea that individuals use all available information to make forward-looking decisions. At its core, the new classical school emphasizes free markets, minimal government intervention, and the belief that the economy is naturally self-correcting. In other words, markets adjust on their own to shocks, making large-scale government policies less effective or even unnecessary. Key pointers such as Milton Friedman, Robert Lucas Jr., George Stigler, and Gary Becker deeply influenced both macroeconomics and microeconomics. Their contribution cover areas such as the role of money in the economy, the importance of rational behavior, the economics of information, and the development of human capital theory. Collectively, their work challenged the dominance of Keynesian economics and laid the groundwork for many of the models and principles used in modern economics analysis today.
My name is Sun Jingxue, matric number 30C088. I will talk about historical background. After Alfred Marshall Time, many new economic theories supported greater government involvement in the economy. For example, Picot theory of externalities suggests that government could improve resource allocation through tax and subsidy. John Robinson's monopsony theory justified minimum wage and labor union. Theory of imperfect competition and monopoly lead to more government regulation, including treating natural monopolies as public utility and breaking out large firms through antitrust law. Market socialists argue that the state could allocate resources as efficiently as private firms. Developer economy promoted government intervention to help poor countries escape poverty. And after World War II, Keynesian economy became the most powerful idea. It said that government should use spending and tax to keep the economy stable and reduce inequality. However, the Chicago School strongly opposed this interventionist idea. Initially, their influence was small, as most economists supported government control. But after the economic crisis of the 1970s, confidence in Keynesian and interventionist policy declined. As a result, Chicago School economics rose to prominence, leading a new wave for thought favoring free market and limited government. But in the 1970s, something unexpected happened. Many countries, especially the United States, faced stagflation, which is high inflation, high unemployment, and slow growth all at the same time. This was a big problem because Keynesian theory could not explain it. When government tried to spend more to reduce unemployment, inflation would just go worse. This crisis lose trust in government intervention and create a space for new ideas. At that time, the Chicago School of Economy, led by scholars such as Milton Friedman and later Robert Emerson, offered an alternative explanation and solution, which is Feynman monetarism, argued that the inflation was a way and everywhere a monetary phenomenon, meaning it resulted from too much money in circulation. Instead of government spending, controlling the money supply was key to stabilizing the economy. Lucas' rational expectation theory explained that people adjust their behavior based on what they expect the government will do. Because of this, policy intervention often fail or cause instability. As a result, the 1970 crisis shifted the intellectual type economists, policymakers, and institutions began to favor free market principle, limited government, and monetary stability. The Chicago School moved from a minority view to a mainstream of economic thought, shaping global policy in the 1918 and beyond.
Okay, now I'm going to talk about major techniques. We total have 5 techniques. Number one is optimizing behavior. Second is monopoly and monopoly effect are not significant. Third is clear property rights and institutional efficiency. Number four is rejection of Keynesian economics and Beckerianism. And final is limited role for government. The first major tenet is optimizing behavior. This means that individuals and firms make rational decisions to achieve the best possible outcome. Consumers aim to maximize their utility, while firms try to maximize their profit. Even under uncertainty, people collect and use information to make the most logical decisions. This idea is closely linked to the concept of rational expectations, where individuals anticipate future policies or market change based on available information. The second tenet is monopoly and monopoly effect are not significant. The Chicago School believes that markets are naturally self-correcting. Price and wages will adjust to bring the economy back to equilibrium even without government help. Monopoly and monopoly effects are considered insignificant in the long run because competition and innovation will eventually balance the market. In short, the economy can recover on its own through market force. The third tenet is clear property rights and institutional effects. The Chicago economists believe that clear and secure property rights encourage people to invest, innovate, and use resources efficiently. Strong institutions such as legal system and enforcement mechanisms help reduce externalities and promote fair trade. These institutions exist because they increase efficiency and help market function smoothly. The following tenet is the rejection of Keynesian fiscal policy. The Chicago School argued that fiscal policy such as government spending or taxation is largely ineffective in influencing real output or employment. Instead, the economy is self-adjusting; it can reach equilibrium on its own. Milton Friedman believed that change in the money supply directly affects nominal GDP, not through interest rate as Keynesian claims. In his favorite words, inflation is always and everywhere. It is a monetary phenomenon. The final tenet is the limited role of government. The Chicago School view government as inherently inefficient due to issues like the principal agent problem, where officials pursue their own interests instead of the public's. Too much intervention can distort market outcome and reduce efficiency. Therefore, the government should focus mainly on maintaining stable rules, protecting property rights, and ensuring monetary stability, not on controlling the economy.
First, the Chicago schools aim to benefit consumers and individuals. Economists like Milton Friedman and George Stigler believe that when markets are free and government's intervention is minimal, people enjoy more choice and better price. In simple words, they argue that free markets allow price to follow real supply and demand, which give consumers more freedoms and better outcomes. Second, the Chicago schools also benefit business and entrepreneurs. They are strongly support regulation and competition. So, when government rules are reduced, businesses have more space to innovate and grow. This creates competitive markets where firms can succeed based on performance, not government control. Third, they believe their ideals would help society as a whole. A free market and efficient market systems, according to them, allocates resources better, reduce waste, and encourage economic growth. They view this as a way to improve overall prosperity, not only for the rich, but for everyone. Lastly, the Chicago schools influenced policymakers and governments. Their theories supported market-friendly reforms like privatizations, tax reductions, and strict monetary control. Governments that followed Chicago schools' ideas aim to create stable economies with low inflation and sustainable long-term growth. Validity of the Chicago schools. During the time when Keynesian economics was dominant, most attention was on macroeconomics. This caused macroeconomics to be ignored. The Chicago schools remains important because it continued the marginalist traditions and focused on macro levels analysis. They had kept classicals and neoclassicals
ideas alive at a time when everyone else was following Keynes. Later on, economists returned to micro-based explanations such as job search theory and leisure choices, which show that the Chicago schools idea were still relevant. So overall, the Chicago schools were valid because it kept core economics logic from disappearing. Usefulness of the Chicago schools. The Chicago schools was also useful because it resists early Fisher's ideas about money supplies and price. In the 1970s and 1980s, the world faced stagflations which Keynesian policies could not explain or fix. Milton Friedman's monetarism shift to focus from unemployment to inflation control. That approved gave policymakers new tools to stabilize the economies when old methods failed. This made the Chicago schools especially useful during a difficult economic period. Correctness of the Chicago schools. Finally, the Chicago schools was correct in several ways. New-classical economists who were influenced the Chicago schools challenged the Keynesians' belief that there is a long-run trade-off between inflation and unemployment. They argued that such a trade-off does not exist in the long run. They also promote the idea of a natural rate of unemployment influenced by efficient markets. During the inflation crisis, their predictions about price stability and unemployment proved more accurate than Keynesian's models. This shows that the Chicago School's theories were correct for the times.
Milton Friedman was born on July 31, 1912 in Brooklyn, New York, to a family of Jewish immigrants. His early life experience shaped his strong appreciation for education and opportunity. Friedman began his academic journey at Rutgers University, where he completed his bachelor's degree in 1932. He then earned a master's degree from the University of Chicago in 1933 and later completed his PhD at Columbia University in 1946. In that same year, Friedman joined the faculty of the University of Chicago. Over time, he became a central and influential figure in shaping what we now call the modern Chicago School of Economics. His ideas play a major role in advancing free market thinking around the world. Friedman receiving the Nobel Prize in Economic Science in 1976. This recognition was awarded for his groundbreaking contribution to consumption theory, his extensive work on monetary history, and his influential views on stabilization policy. Throughout his career, Friedman was deeply influenced by economist Frank Knight, as well as the broader tradition of classical liberalism and free market economics. This influence helped shape his lifelong advocacy for limited government intervention and the power of market force. Overall, Better Friedman's background, education, and ideas made him one of the most important and impactful economists of the 20th century. In 1957, Milton Friedman published one of his most influential works, A Theory of the Consumption Function. In this book, he introduced the permanent income hypothesis, which fundamentally changed how economists understand household consumption. Friedman argued that a person's actual or measured income is made up of two components, permanent income and transitory income. Permanent income refers to the long-term average income that individuals expect to earn based on their skills, education, and opportunities. Transitory income, on the other hand, represent short-term or temporary fluctuation, such as bonus, temporary layoffs, or unexpected shocks. According to Friedman, people base their consumption decision mainly on permanent income, not on temporary change. This means that consumptions can be expressed as consumption out of permanent income plus consumption out of transitory income, with the permanent part being the dominant driver. To support this theory, Friedman conducted empirical tests using two types of data. First, he used budget studies, which are cross-sectional data to show that consumption patterns across different households were consistent with the hypothesis. Second, he used time series data to study aggregate consumption over longer periods, finding further evidence that long-term income expectation guide consumption more than short-term income variation. Overall, the permanent income hypothesis become a cornerstone of modern consumption theory and significantly challenged earlier Keynesian views. Milton Friedman's monetary theory evolved throughout his career, and by the late 1950s and early 1960s, he placed strong emphasis on money demand as a central variable in macroeconomics. In his 1960 book, A Program for Monetary Stability, Friedman argued that the money supply should grow at a steady and predictable rate. According to him, unstable or discretionary change in the money supply could create unnecessary economic fluctuation. A stable growth rule, on the other hand, would support long-term economic stability. Friedman also developed a money demand function expressed as MD equal to F bracket Y I and W, where represents income, I is the interest rate, and W stands for wealth. He emphasized that money demand depends not only on income but also on wealth, uncertainty, and broader economic conditions. One of Friedman's key arguments was that the demand for money is relatively stable. This stability is vital for monetary policies. If policymakers understand how people demand money, then controlling the money supply leads to more predictable effects on output, prices, and inflation. This idea became a foundational pillar of monetarism and significantly influenced central banking practice around the world. In 1963, Milton Friedman and Anna J. Stewart published one of the most influential works in modern macroeconomics, A Monetary History of the United States, 1867 to 1960. This book used extensive historical evidence to re-evaluate how monetary force shape major economic events in the United States. The central thesis of their work is that monetary policy truly matters. They show that change in the money supply was strongly connected to major economic fluctuations, including the severity of the Great Depression. According to Friedman and Stewart, many of the worst economic outcomes were not inevitable. They were caused or intensive by poor monetary management. Their research revived the quantity theory of money, expressed as MV equal to PY, and placed it into a modern empirical context. They argued that the velocity of money, or V, is reasonably stable in the long run. This stability gives the equation predictive power and supports the idea that change in the money supply have direct and systematic impacts on prices and output. In terms of policy, Friedman and Stewart strongly advocated for rule-based monetary policy rather than frequent discretionary intervention. One of Friedman's major recommendations in the K% rule, where the money supply should grow at a constant, predictable rate each year. The logic is simple. Excessive money growth cause inflation, while insufficient growth can worsen recession. Their historical analysis pointed to a key example, which is the Great Depression. They argued that overly contractionary monetary policy by the Federal Reserve significantly deepened and prolonged the economic collapse. Milton Friedman have made a major contribution to macroeconomics by redefining how we understand the Phillips curve. The traditional short-run Phillips curve shows an inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment, meaning that when policymakers stimulate the economy, unemployment can temporarily fall, but inflation rises. However, Friedman argued that this trade-off exists only in the short run. Once workers and firms notice that actual inflation is rising, they adjust their expectations of inflation. This expected inflation, often written as PE, rises over time as people learn from experience. As expected, inflation rises, for example, from 5% to 7% to 99%. The short run Phillips curve shifts upward. This means that for the same level of unemployment, the economy how faces higher inflation. Each shift brings the economy back to the natural rate of unemployment, or U star. Friedman emphasized that unemployment cannot be pushed below this natural rate permanently because the economy always returns to U star in the long run. The long run Phillips curve is vertical. This shows that in the long run, there is no trade-off between inflation and unemployment. The policy implication is straightforward. Attempts to lower unemployment below its natural rate will only lead to increasing inflation with no lasting improvement in employment. Fragments insight reshape modern macroeconomic policy and the way central banks think about inflation expectation.
Robert Emerson Lucas Jr. He is born on 15 September 1937 in Yakima, Washington, U.S. and passed away on 15 May 2023 at Chicago, Illinois, U.S. Robert E. Lucas Jr. began his academic journey at the University of Chicago, where he earned his Bachelor of Art in History in 1959. He later returned to the same university to pursue a PhD in economy, which he completed in 1964. His doctoral dissertation titled Substitution Between Labor and Capital in U.S. Manufacturing was supervised by Elner Herberger, a leading figure in the Chicago School of Economy. After completing his PhD, Lucas began teaching as an assistant professor at Carnegie Mellon University, where he worked from 1963 to 1975. In 1975, he joined the University of Chicago as a professor of economy, continuing the strong legacy of the Chicago School alongside renowned economist Milton Friedman and George Stigler. Throughout his career, Lucas became known as one of the most influential macroeconomists of the 20th century. In 1995, he was awarded the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Science. The Nobel commitment recognized him for having developed and applied the hypothesis of rational expectation and thereby having transformed macroeconomic analysis and deepened our understanding of economic policy. This groundbreaking work researched how economists think about the government policy, inflation, and business cycle, making a new era in modern economic thought. This is the main theory developed by Robert Emerson Lucas Jr., which is rational expectation theory and Lucas aggregate surprise analysis. Let's start with the earlier theory by Milton Friedman. Friedman proposed the concept of adaptive expectation, which means that people form their view about future inflation mainly based on past and current inflation trend. They gradually adjust this expectation as time passes as they see new information. But then comes Robert Emerson Lucas Jr., who took this idea a major step further. He introduced what we call the rational expectation hypothesis into macroeconomy. According to Lucas, people in the economy, whether they are consumer, worker, investor, or firm, all are not passive learners. They are rational and forward-looking. This means they use all available information, including their understanding of government policy and past mistakes, to make the best possible prediction about the future. So, what does this mean for economic policy? Lucas argued that predictable or systematic government policy, like printing more money or increasing spending to reduce unemployment, cannot systematically fool people. People will anticipate the consequences of such action. For example, if the government uses expansionary policy to boost employment, people will immediately expect higher inflation. As a result, workers demand higher nominal wage to maintain their purchasing power. Sellers raise price of goods and raw material, and lenders increase interest rate to protect against inflation. Because everyone adjusts their behavior right away, the policy loses its short-term effect. Output and employment don't rise as the government expected, only inflation increase. In graphical terms, if we look at the Phillips curve, which shows the relationship between inflation and unemployment, instead of moving from point A to point B, a short-term trade-off, the economy jumped directly from point A to point C. That means inflation rises from P1 to P2, but output and employment stay the same in the long run. So, in the long run, the Phillips curve becomes vertical, showing no trade-off between inflation and unemployment. Only unexpected policy change, what people could not predict, can have short-term real effect. But once people learn and adjust, those effects disappear. Next is Lucas' aggregate supply analysis. Let's begin with the background. Robert Emerson Lucas Jr., one of the key figures of the New-Classical school, developed a theory explaining how anticipated and unanticipated change in aggregate demand or AD affect the economy different. His model built on the idea of rational expectation. He also distinguished between short-run and long-run aggregate supplies, which help us understand how temporary and permanent effects differ. Let's look at what happens when a change in aggregate demand is unanticipated. Imagine the economy starts at point A with a price level of P1 and real output Q1. If there is an unexpected rise in investment, aggregate demand increases from 81 to 82. At first, firms notice that the price of their product are rising, and they mistakenly think it is just their own price going up, not the overall price level. Expecting higher profit, they expand production and hire more workers, moving the economy from point A to B. As a result, output rises from Q1 to Q2, showing a short-run increase along an outward sloping AS curve. But later, firms realized that all price and costs, including wage and input, are rising together. Their profit margins shrink back to normal, and they cut back on production. The short-run AS curve shifts left, and the economy moved back from point B to point C, returning to its natural output level Q1. This shows that the short-run effects of unexpected demand change are temporary. Once people realize the general price trend, output returns to normal. The same logic works in reverse. If aggregate demand unexpectedly fell from 81 to 83, firms think only their product prices are falling. They reduce production and employment, moving from point A to D. Later, when they realize all price and wage are falling, real costs drop and production becomes profitable again. The short-run AS curve shifts rightward, and the economy moves to point E, returning to Q1. So, according to Lucas, the economy is self-corrective. Decisions fix themselves over time without government intervention, just a classical economics belief. When changes in aggregate demand are anticipated, suppose the central bank announced that it will increase the money supply, shifting 81 to 82. Firms and workers already expect higher price. They know that both selling price and cost will rise together, so profits stay unchanged. Because of that, firms don't expand production or hire more workers. In this case, both AD and AS shift the same time, AD1 to AD2 and AS1 to AS2, and the economy moves directly from point A to point C along the vertical long-run AS curve. Output remains constant in Q1, and only the price level rise, causing inflation. The same thing happens with anticipated decrease. Output does not change, only price adjusts. To summary, Robert Lucas' theory of rational expectation permanently changed the way economists understand the macroeconomy. His idea became a core part of modern economic thought because most economics today accept that people use all available information when forming expectations about the future. However, not everyone agrees with the stronger claim of the New-Classical school that Lucas helped establish. In particular, critics challenge two main ideas, which is the idea of automation self-correction, the belief that the economy will quickly return to full employment without any government help, and second, the idea of policy ineffectiveness, the claim that fiscal and monetary policy cannot influence real output or employment in the long run. Mainstream economists argue that these assumptions are too idealized. In reality, price and wage are not perfectly flexible, especially when they need to move downward, which is a condition called downward liquidity. Because of this, recessions don't automatically fix themselves quickly. Many economists believe that government intervention through fiscal or monetary policy is often necessary to help restore economic growth and employment. They also disagree with the claim that all expansionary policy automatically cause inflation. In the real world, both policymakers and the public may interpret inflation risk differently, meaning the effect of such policy can vary. Overall, Lucas Retter's contribution was that he brought microeconomic principles like rational behavior, perfect competition, and general equilibrium into macroeconomic analysis. This helped transform macroeconomy into a more rigorous and model-based science. Yet, even today, there is ongoing debate about whether Lucas' model truly captured the complexities of real-world economics, where uncertainty, liquidity, and imperfect information still play a major role. Thank you.
My section will discuss George J. Stigler and his important contribution to the new classical or Chicago School of Economics. George Stigler was one of the most influential members of the University of Chicago Economics Department, and he received the Nobel Prize in 1982 for his pioneering studies of market structure and regulations. His work helped develop and strengthen many of the core ideas that define the Chicago School, especially market efficiency, rational behavior, and limited government interventions. The first major contribution is his work on the economic of information. Stigler was the first economist to explain that information itself has economic value. He argued that people and firms must spend time and resources to gather information such as comparing price or checking product quality before making a decision. This means that while markets are not perfectly informed, individuals still behave rationally by balancing the cost and benefit of information. His research introduced the concept of search costs, and it strongly supports the Chicago School idea that people make decisions logically to maximize efficiency. The second major contribution is his theory of economic regulation, developed in 1971. Stigler introduced what is known as the capture theory, which argued that government regulations is often influenced or captured by the industry. It is meant to control. Instead of protecting consumers, regulation may serve the interests of powerful firms or political groups. This idea perfectly supports the Chicago School belief that government intervention often costs inefficiency and should be kept to a minimum. Stigler showed that markets usually perform better when they are left to operate freely under clear rules rather than constant control. His third contribution lies in the field of industrial organizations and market structure. Stigler used real-world data to study how markets work, and he found that most markets are competitive in the long run. Even if some firms are large or dominant in the short term, he believed that monopoly power is usually temporary because new firms, innovations, and competitions will eventually restore balance. This conclusion reinforced the Chicago School view that the economy is self-correcting and efficient when left to the market force. Finally, Stigler made a lasting intellectual and institutional contribution to the Chicago tradition. He played a major role in expanding price theory, promoting empirical research, and monitoring other great economists like Gary Becker and Robert Lucas. As the editor of the Journal of Political Economy, he also helped spread of the Chicago School free market philosophy around the world.
Gary Becker was an American economist who won the Nobel Prize in 1992. He studied at Princeton, completed his PhD at the University of Chicago, and later taught at both Columbia and Chicago. Becker became known as an intellectual imperialist because he has spent economics analysis into areas usually studied by psychology or sociology, like family, crime, and discriminations. He used classical economics ideas such as rational behavior, stable preferences, and market equilibrium to explain everyday life. His words made people see the economics can be used to understand social issues, not only just money and markets. According to Becker, discrimination happens when some employers have a taste for discriminations, meaning they let prejudice influence their hiring decisions. He introduced the discrimination coefficients, which measure the psychological cost employers feel when hiring someone they are biased against. For example, if the wage is $6 but the discrimination coefficient is 0.5, prejudice employer feels like hiring that workers cost $9. Because of this discriminatory, employers end up with higher costs. In a competitive market, employers who discriminate lose profits, while those hire fairly become more competitive. So, over time, discrimination should decrease because the market punishes firms that discriminate. Becker's human capital theories explain that education, training, and experience are investments that increase future incomes. Before investing in education, individuals compare costs such as tuition and lost income with future benefits like higher earnings. In the future returns are bigger than the cost people invest. He also separates general training, which is useful everywhere, from specific training, which only benefits certain firms. This theory explains why skilled workers earn more, why unemployment is lower for trained individuals, and why capable people pursue more educations. Because human capital theories is now one of the foundation of labor economics and development policy. This graph shows the college requires upfront sacrifices, direct costs like tuitions and indirect costs like foregone wages. If the extra future incomes from education is greater than this cost, the educations become a rational investment. In his book A Treatise on the Family, Becker applied economics idea to family decisions. He used concepts like maximizing utility, stable preferences, and equilibrium to explain why families behave the way they do. His family theories focus on four main areas, which is marriage, fertility, altruism, and divorce. Theory of marriage. Becker says marriage happens because couples can increase their well-being by dividing tasks efficiently. Partners choose roles depending on who is more productive in the market or at home. Women traditionally prefer long-term commitment to reduce the risk of being abandoned, especially when they specialize in household work. Even small differences in skills can create specializations and improve efficiency. Bakers also argue that people tend to marry partners who match their quality, known as positive assortative matching. Next, fertility. Becker explained that children are like durable goods that bring satisfactions, but they are expensive to raise. The cost of a child includes both direct costs and indirect costs, like time and misses work opportunities. Family decides how many children to have based on income and the price of raising children and the trade-off between quantity and quality. When women have higher wages, the opportunity cost of raising children increase. So, families tend to have fewer children but invest more in each child. Welfare programs that reduce the cost of children can increase fertility rates. Altruism. Because define altruism as gain satisfactions from someone else's happiness, especially within families. Altruism increase the benefits of marriage because one person's happiness spreads to others. He introduced the rotten kid theorem, which say even a selfish child will behave in a way that benefits the family if the family's success also benefits them. For example, through inheritance. Although altruism reduces selfish behavior, its influence becomes weaker as the number of the family members increase. Lastly, divorce. Because argued that people marry with incomplete information because searching for a partner is time-consuming. After marriage, new information may reveal that the match is not ideal, making divorce a rational option. Divorce is more commonly early in marriage because partners are still learning about each other. Life events like career success, income changes, or healthy problems can reduce compatibility. He also said that when women's productivity rises, the benefits of traditional specializations falls, which increase the likelihood of divorce.
The Chicago School of Economics, particularly the new classical tradition, has left a profound and lasting impact on modern economic theory and policy making. Milton Friedman's monetarism reshaped central banking and placed long-term monetary stability at the core of macroeconomic policy. Robert Lucas' rational expectations revolution changed how economists model decision making, showing that people use available information forward looking, which transformed modern macroeconomic theory. Judge Stigler work on regulation and information economics demonstrated how government policies often produce unintended consequences and how information shapes market outcomes. Meanwhile, Gary Becker expanded economics beyond markets, applying economic reasoning to human capital, family decision, crime, and social behavior. Collectively, these contributions share a common foundation, a belief in rational individuals, efficient markets, and the importance of economic freedom. Their ideas fundamentally change how economists think about incentives, effectiveness, and the limits of government intervention. Today, the influence of the Chicago School continues to shape debates, policies, and research worldwide. Its legacy remains a cornerstone of modern economics, inspiring ongoing innovation and discussion in the pursuit of a more efficient and informed economic world.